Welcome everyone, I'm Dr. Sam Spinelli, physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach with Cincinnati Athletics. Today we're going to be talking about how to build strong quads at home. The goal here is to be able to show you different options within progressions of movements that you can select that will help you to emphasize working your quads, making them stronger, developing more muscle mass, basically everything that you'd want. All the movements that we're going to show you today require nothing more than common household items like a book or a towel. These are things that you could load up with additional options like dumbbells, barbells, bands, anything like that. That would be great if you need it. But the goal here is to show you progressions of movements that you don't need additional weight for and that you can just scale it to the appropriate challenge for you. The quads are awesome. In fact, the quadriceps might be one of my favorite muscle groups personally. They're incredibly important from a performance standpoint in actions like squatting, where they're one of the prime movers, and in other movements like decelerating from a sprint, where your quads are game changers. And then we also have the aesthetic standpoint where we look at someone that has a nice beautiful quad. They stand out whether in jeans, shorts, basically anything. The movements that we're going to show you today lay upon a continuum from compound movements that work the quads as well as a lot of other muscles, and then all the way to the other end of that spectrum where they're going to be more isolated, primarily only working the quads. The first movement that we're going to look at is going to be a more compound based movement, and this is going to be the split squat. However, the way that we're going to set up the split squat is where we're actually going to have a small front heel elevation. The key word that I said there is that it's a heel elevation, not a foot elevation. When we're elevating just the heel, it's going to put us on a slight angle where we're going to emphasize the need to travel more forward. This will be something that's going to be really beneficial in encouraging more quadriceps action. You want to set up in a split squat so both feet stationary, in place, around a hip width stance. And then you're gonna have your front heel elevated on something like a book, and that way it's just on a slight angle. And then from here, we're gonna go up and down, encouraging that knee to go forward. What I really like about the split squat is that we can scale it very easily to where you currently are. If you find that you don't tolerate that knee going very far forward, that's cool. You don't have to let it go very far forward. You can keep a little bit more vertical shin and play around with the zone that you're comfortable with. As well, you can adjust your depth very easily, going deeper if you tolerate that, or staying a little bit higher if you're not comfortable with it. And that's going to make this movement very adjustable to the individual. Now for some people, the front heel elevated squat is going to be sufficiently challenging just by itself. Doing 15 repetitions at a nice controlled tempo can be quite hard. However, if you find that that's not hard enough, there's a few different ways that you can make this more challenging at home. Number one is if you have a backpack, you can load that sucker up, toss it on, and then start going. You can have it on in the standard backpack way, or if you want to make it extra quad challenging, you can actually put your backpack on the front, and that'll increase the forward load that you have to deal with, which will increase the challenge on that quad. Now, if you don't have a backpack and you still want to try and find a way to make it a little bit more challenging, then what you can do is actually set up with a towel. You take the towel, you put it underneath the front part of your front foot, and that way it's secured against the ground, and then you grab each end of the towel, you go down through the split squat, and then as you come up, you'll be able to push against the towel, primarily focusing on pushing with that front leg, and it'll be a brief isometric where you can push really hard, essentially as hard as you choose to, and then you can come back down and repeat for all of your repetitions. A third thing that you can do to make this more challenging at home is you can actually go to a rear foot elevated split squat. What this will do is it'll start to preference that lead leg to an even higher degree. All you got to do is set up the same way that you just were, but now have a chair or a couch behind you. That way you can flip your rear leg and have your laces pointing down. When we're set up in this position, you'll see that you'll naturally start to encourage a little bit more forward weight distribution on that front leg. It's hard to say the exact amount. When we're in that first split squat position, it's probably more of like a 60% preference to that front leg. Now it'll be somewhere between like a 70 and 80% preference. If you're getting more comfortable with the movement, you can start going deeper, you can start letting that knee go more forward, and all these different options. So this split squat is a great option for a ton of people and can be very challenging for most individuals. Now we're going to transition into the heel elevated squat. This is a great movement for a lot of people. It's a bilateral based movement, so it's very stable, so it doesn't require much balance, and by elevating the heels, it makes the movement a lot more comfortable for most individuals. If you were someone who found squats challenging, you had a hard time getting down, you struggled with sitting back, this essentially eliminates that challenge. And by elevating that heel, it lets you sit down more vertically and focus on getting your quads more active in the movement. Now you can set up with the same stance that you're used to while squatting and just elevate your heels, such as putting a book underneath each of them. This will help to preference those quads, but if you want to shift even more quad focused, you can start to bring your feet closer together, as once they're in a more inline position, it'll have your knee travel even more forwards, which again will start to use your quads to an even higher degree. To make this more challenging, we've got 3 options again. Number 1, you've got the backpack option. You toss that sucker on, you load up the back, the front, anything that you want. The second option is setting up like we did with the prior one, utilizing a towel. I really like that for this option because here we can go down to the bottom position, and then once you come up, you can actually stay there and push for a significant amount of time and really have a crazy quad burn in this isometric hold. Huge fan of this option for a lot of people, particularly those that don't have a lot of equipment that they can use at home. Now the third option we didn't talk about with the split squat. You could apply it there, but I find that it works really well here. And it's gonna be where we're gonna be doing pulses. For this, we're gonna set up the same as we did earlier, but now we're gonna come down to the bottom position. We're gonna come up just a little bit. Once you feel peak tension, then you're gonna come back down. That bottom position, that bottom half range, we really utilize our quads to a high degree. So we're gonna focus on it, we're gonna stay there, and we're not gonna let the tension off. You're gonna go up and down in a nice and controlled pace and bust up those quads. You're gonna make them burn like crazy with this method. If you have a backpack, you can double up on this and you can do multiple options here. So far we've covered 2 squat variations. Number 1, the front heel elevated split squat. Then the second option, the heel elevated squat. These are both fantastic, but they're very general based movements still. They do preference your quads, but they don't totally focus on them. And now we're gonna shift to more isolated based movements. The first one is gonna be the quadruped leg extension. Here we're gonna be set up on our hands and knees. We're gonna keep our hands in place, then we're gonna keep our shoulders stacked over our hands, and then we're gonna extend our knees into this almost downward dog position. Instead of pushing back like we would for a normal downward dog, we're gonna keep our shoulders where they are, as that's gonna keep more tension on the quads. Now for a lot of people, this isn't gonna be that challenging of a movement. So that's where these progressions come in, because this movement has a lot of options to progress. The first thing that you could obviously do is go to one leg. By just lifting that other leg up and going from the ground here, you can find that that's a significant challenge for most people. Pumping out 15 reps with this movement can really light up one quad at a time. A second option that we can go to is going and elevating the feet. By going to a feet elevation, we're going to increase the range of motion that the knees go through, making the quads work through a greater length. This can be a great option, as well as increasing how much weight distribution is on your legs. Then obviously you can go to the single leg version of this movement. Being in the single leg position with the heel elevated will be extremely challenging for most people. If you can pump out 15 reps on this movement with nice controlled pace, you're gonna have some very strong quads. Our second, more isolated movement is gonna be the Reverse Nordic. This is a great option to start challenging your rectus femoris to a higher degree. In some of these other movements where we're really focusing on knee extension, our rectus femoris doesn't get challenged as much. But here when we transition to a movement that's gonna be doing both knee extension and hip flexion, at least in an isometric fashion, we really challenge the rectus femoris. This movement can be scaled in a lot of different ways. We're just gonna show you a few options here, but we're gonna have a future video on sissy squats that's gonna break this down more, and also put an additional link down below on a few more ways that you can scale this. The first one that we're gonna look at is where you're gonna be kneeling on a pad, and you're gonna be starting off in a kneeling squat. From here, as you start to extend your hips, you're actually gonna leave your shoulders leaning back. That way you're getting into a pseudo reverse Nordic at the top, and then you come back down. You'll feel that your quads get lit up a little bit from this. It's not crazy, but for individuals that haven't really ever challenged this movement before, it can be quite hard. Then from here, you can start to go into the Reverse Nordic. You can start off and just gradually work your range of motion as you're comfortable with. You don't have to rush it. Start off with a more basic version, and then start to gradually progress your depth as you get more comfortable. Now, those two more isolated ones still challenge a lot of other muscles. With the first one, that quadruped leg extension, we're still challenging our shoulders to a fair amount and our trunk. In the second one, the Reverse Nordic, we're working our trunk to a fairly good amount, particularly if you're going to a more significant lean back. Now this third one is going to be purely quads, and it's going to be the wall sit. The wall sit may bring back nightmares for a lot of individuals from classic high school days, or maybe in college football experiences, where a lot of coaches will use this movement to make their athletes suffer. Instead, we're going to use this to our advantage and challenge our quads to a high degree. Because when we're in this position, we're gonna be focusing on just essentially resisting knee extension in an isometric fashion, it's gonna be purely quads. So you can sit up with your legs out in front of you, back against the wall, and then come down with your shins about vertical. This is the more standard traditional wall sit. While this is a good starting point, it's again, not that challenging for a lot of people, and we can scale it very well. To do that, one of the first things that you can do is actually pull your feet back. By inching your feet more and more back, you put a higher demand on your quads because now, number one, they're at a greater length, and two, we're gonna be changing the moment arm position because they're gonna be having those feet placed further back and having a greater distance from the axis point. For some people, this option might not work great. If you have limited ankle mobility, you might have a hard time pulling those feet back. And that's where this second option comes in really well. Here, we're gonna set up in the same way as we did for the initial starting position, but now we're gonna lift the heels up. Here, instead of working on bringing the feet back, we're gonna elevate the heel so you can lift those heels up and try and maintain your same position. Think to still keep pushing into the ground, trying to extend your knees and hold that position. This can be a very challenging position for a lot of individuals. What's nice about this is that when we get that heel lifted up, it might allow you to pull your feet back a little bit more, which will again, light up those quads to a higher degree. And then our third option for making this movement more challenging is gonna be by actually going to a single leg. By going to one leg, we shift all of that challenge onto one side at a time. This is gonna be a great way for individuals who maybe have a unilateral difference and struggle with prior movements that we did earlier that were unilateral based. Here you have a lot more stability and control. And if you still find that you're shifting a lot or doing something funky in it, you can still be in a one-sided wall sit and have your other foot on the ground to provide a little bit of extra stability. And over time, you can progressively take that away as you build more strength and more tolerance in that quadricep. So that's 5 quadriceps-based progressions that you can utilize at home without any special equipment, just some basic household items like a book, towel, and a chair. What's awesome about this is that you can pick the individual movement that you feel most comfortable with, scale it to where you're currently at, and then progress over time and see your quadriceps increase in strength, tolerance, and so much more. If you can hit that like button down below, it helps us out a ton. And if you're enjoying this kind of content, make sure you subscribe as we try to release at least one video every week. If you're looking for a training program to either help you at home or at a gym, check out the programs that we offer at the link below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.